Hey, good morning, everybody. How we doing? Good. It's good to see you. Thanks for being here for our second service today. Easter's coming up, and I hope you were able to gather most of that information that Robin shared with us. We'll actually have an email that'll go out this week with a few more details in it, so make sure you read our emails. But one of the things that I want to bring to your attention right now is these mugs. When you came in today, you probably saw quite a few of them out in the lobby area. You may have heard about this last week. We are inviting you to mug your one, all right? Mug your neighbor, mug your coworker, mug your friend, mug somebody on the street, legally, of course. Whatever it takes to invite people to come to be a part of Easter services. So as you leave today, grab one of these, grab 5 of these, whatever you want to do. These are not for you to take home. These are for you to invite people. We even got some goodies in here. We've got communion for them. No, I'm just kidding. We're not really. That's from you later. We've got a Starbucks gift card in here, so you don't have to worry about that. We've got an Easter invite that is a part of this too. So make sure that you grab one or more of these today and invite people to come be a part of Easter next Sunday. All right? All right. We're going to throw a few images up here on the screen for you. Take a look at this one. There's physics in there somewhere. I'm just not sure it's good physics, but you got physics here. What about this next one? If OSHA still exists, I don't think they would like this very much, would they? How about this next one? Ingenuity. I love it. All right. They're using ingenuity there. Probably not smart, but here's the last one. I know you say that, but I've thought about doing it at my house before, but I haven't. But it looks like it should work. If you think about those images, there's a couple of things about them. The first thing is, did you notice that all of the people in them are dudes? That's why women live longer, okay? But the second part to this is these are bad things these people are going to do, right? Something bad is getting ready to happen because of these dumb things that they're doing. Today, we're continuing the series called God, I Have a Question. And we're going to answer this question that I believe that many of us ask, and many people ask me, God, why do bad things happen to good people? When natural disasters take place, the question is, God, why did you let this tornado, this earthquake, this hurricane go through this state, this region, this town? God, why did you let this bad thing happen to good people? Or sometimes when there's sickness or disease or unexpected death, God, why did you let her get cancer? God, why did you let that child die? God, why did you let them be in a terrible accident? God, these are good people. Why did these bad things happen to good people? Because in our minds, this is the way we think about this. God, if you're supposed to be this caring, loving, all-knowing, all-powerful God, why do you let bad things happen to young kids? To moms with families, to people who are always helping others, to people who are kind, to people who are innocent, to people I love, to people that I know. Why do you let this happen to me? God, why do you allow these bad things to happen to good people? And I'm going to be honest with you, that's a very, very tough question to answer. But it is a question that has been asked for centuries. The Greek philosopher Epicurus from the 4th century BC said, is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he is impotent. Is he able but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Whence then is evil? These are questions from 2,400 years ago, struggling with this. God, why do you let bad things happen to good people? But we actually find this question even before that. About 300 years before this, we have this prophet whose name is Habakkuk. And Habakkuk asks these same questions. Look at Habakkuk chapter 1. It says, how long, O Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen? Violence is everywhere. I cry, but you do not come to save. Must I forever see these evil deeds? Why must I watch all this misery? Wherever I look, I see destruction and violence. Here's Habakkuk, and in those days, as a prophet, God would come to the prophet and say, here's what I need you to tell the Israelites, right? I need to confront them, and you're going to be the person who's going to share this information with them. This is very different. Habakkuk now confronts God and goes to God and says, God, why are you allowing these bad things to happen to these good people, to your people? Now, the context of this is around 586, 587 BC. This was after the Babylonians had actually come into Jerusalem. They'd taken over Jerusalem. They'd taken over the kingdom that is there. And so they come in and they're treating God's people. They're treating the Israelites horribly. Habakkuk sees this and has these intense questions for God. God, why are these bad things happening to these people? The questions that Habakkuk asked, the questions that Epicurus asked, maybe they sound familiar to us too. Because of things we've experienced in our life, or maybe things we're going through right now, because of the things other people have experienced in their life, because we are watching people that we love and care for experiencing something in their life, we wonder, why do these bad things happen to good people? And like I said, that's a really hard question to answer. And I'm going to go ahead and be blunt that the answers I give today for some of you aren't going to help you at all. And you're going to need to wrestle with this for maybe quite a bit of time after this. And that's totally fine. Just keep searching and looking for answers to this question. But for some of you, what I'm going to say today may help alleviate that tension that you feel, may answer those questions for you, may help you move in a direction where you can begin to feel a little bit more confident in the answers that you are looking for, all right? So set it up that way. But before we get to that place of answering this question, I want to ask you another question. Why do we ask this specific question? Like, why do we get so stuck, and why do we get so enamored with this particular question? Well, to answer that question, I'm going to ask you one more question, all right? Hear me out. When your life is good, when your cholesterol is perfect, when everyone you know is healthy, when your marriage is great, when loved ones are all alive, when there are no natural disasters, when everything in your life and life around you is good, do you ask this same question? I'm going to go ahead and answer that for you. The answer is no. When your life is good, when the life of other people that you love and care for is good, when you look around the world and it seems like everything is going smoothly, we don't ask this question. You know, when we ask this question when there is one thing, when there's suffering. Jack Cottrell, in his book, The Faith Once for All, put it this way. He said, what makes the existence of such phenomena a problem? Of course, there's always the practical problem of how to deal with or cope with pain and suffering. But the basic problem of evil is more theoretical than practical. That is, it is problematic to think that evil could exist alongside a particular view of God. Specifically, the view found in traditional Christianity and presented in this book. It is the view that God is all-wise, all-good, and all-powerful. But then he says the problem is this: how is the existence of such a God consistent with the existence of evil? It seems impossible that the following three assertions could all be true at the same time. God is all good, God is omnipotent, and evil exists. This evil that he's talking about here, these bad things that we experience in life, the pain, the hurt, and the suffering, and this pain and suffering and hurt we experience, what does that then do? It then influences how we view God. We see God and we think that God is supposed to be love. And God is supposed to be loving, and that God cares, and God is all-powerful. But if all of these are true, then why does God allow evil and pain and hurt and suffering? And so what I want to do is spend the rest of our time looking for answers to this particular question. And as I do this, I actually want to start theologically. Now, this is a place that in this setting I could say, hey, it's the devil's fault, right? Or hey, there's these spiritual forces that are powerful and are part of this. I'm going to leave that for another series at some other time. I want to look at this theologically from more of a human view, a physical view, if you will, okay? So let me start there. Let's start theologically. Here's the first reason I would give that bad things happen. Bad things happen because we live in a broken world. Whether you follow Jesus or not, you know that we live in a broken world. It's not hard to understand that. We can look around us and we can see hatred. We can see injustice. We can see killing and torture and abuse. We can see pain and hurt and suffering and evil. It's very easy for us to look around the world and to see these things living and existing in our broken world. But the question is, how does a broken world explain why bad things happen to good people? I mean, why is this world broken? Why do evil and suffering exist in the first place? Well, let me share a few ideas that some people will say the reason that we have evil in the world. One idea is that God is good, but not actually all powerful. That in the end, God actually cannot control evil, and that's why evil kind of runs amok, if you will, in our world. Others say God is all powerful, but not all good, so evil exists because God actually wants evil to exist. Others say God is all powerful, God is good, but God created evil to exist. It's almost like a good story, right? You need the tension. And so not only do you have the protagonist of God, but you need an antagonist. And so God created evil and allowed that antagonist to be present. And that was needed for us to have this world that we live in. And still others say God caused evil to exist so that you could grow spiritually. That evil was created for the sole purpose of you getting closer to God. Now, there's probably more than just this, but I will let you know that none of these really help us understand why we live in a broken world. So the question still is, why do we live in a broken world? Well, I'm going to take you all the way back to the creation story. In Genesis chapter 1, we read about days 3, 4, and 5. God creates, and at the end of those days, it says, and God saw that it was, help me out here, good, right. That Hebrew word for good is this word you're going to see on the screen. It's actually pronounced tov. Tov means pleasant, desirable, orderly, harmony. And really the best word we got to define that is our word good. But this good that we read here in the creation story actually means there's no flaws, that there are no defects, there is no sickness, there's no suffering, there's no death, there's no sadness, there's no loneliness, there's no violence. That God creates the world and God creates it full of tov, full of good. Day 6 happens. God creates humanity, the ultimate creation. At the end of that day, God saw that it was what? Very good, right? So he put a little very in there, very tov. Well, God tells Adam and Eve in this goodness, he says, hey, here are my expectations for you. This is what your life should look like. Enjoy my goodness. And so this good that God created was created so that humanity could have its necessities of life, that the needs of humanity could be taken care of for one sole purpose, to glorify God. And so humanity was given all this goodness so that it would glorify God. And that's what Adam and Eve do for a period of time. They do that. They enjoy what God has created. They enjoy God's good. But at some point, something changes, and they want to manipulate creation for themselves. God's like, here is my good. Experience my good. Love my good. Enjoy my good. And in that, I want you to glorify me. Well, Adam and Eve, they look at this good and they say, hey, that good's good, but we actually want gooder, okay? I know it's not a word, but I'm going to say it over and over today. Hopefully it'll make us understand what we're talking about here. God's like, here's my good. Adam and Eve say, no, we want gooder. We want to live up to our own expectations, our own desires. And so they give up on God's good. They sin. They miss the mark of following Jesus. They want to do their own thing and live their own lives. They think their gooder is better than God's good. But why would they choose this gooder? Why would they even have an opportunity to do this? Well, here's the answer to why we live in a broken world. God gives them something called free will. Because when God creates the world and creates the universe, He doesn't create evil in the midst of that. Remember, when he creates, it's good, it's tov. But God creates humanity and says, you've got free will. You get to choose whether you want to choose my good or whether you want to choose your gooder. And they choose their own good. Back to Cottrell. Here's what he says about free will. He says, why did God do this? The Bible does not give an explicit answer to this question, but we infer from other teaching in Scripture that God's chief purpose and desire were to have creatures who would love, serve, and glorify him of their free choice and not by coercion or manipulation. He talks about inferring something here. How do we infer this? Well, the easiest thing to do is to go back and to look at the teachings of Jesus. In fact, in the teachings of Jesus, oftentimes we hear him refer back to this thing called the greatest commandment. And Matthew 22, this is what Jesus says. He says, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And that actually goes back to when the Israelites are coming out of Egypt. God's like, hey, most important thing for you to do is to worship me, right? And in fact, the Jewish people, every morning when they would wake up, every evening when they would go to bed, they would pray this particular prayer here. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And this was just a part of who they were. God's desire has never been to coerce us into loving him. God's desire is that we would choose to love God. And we love God by living out this greatest commandment. But because of free will, we also have the choice to hate and reject God if we want to. We, so often, though, choose our gooder over God's good. And this is the free will that we have been given. Cottrell says this about this goodness and how it plays out in our life. He says, here's the extent of God's responsibility for evil. He is responsible for its possibility, but not its actuality. See, God allows evil and pain and hurt and suffering to exist, but God is not responsible for the pain and hurt and evil and suffering that we face in life. That responsibility has fallen on us because God has said, you have the free will to choose my good or your good. Now, I hope that you will choose me. I hope that you will follow me. I hope that you will fully experience my good. But as we all know, we sometimes like our good more than God's good. So this kind of explains why we have moral evil in the world. But what about physical evil? Okay? What about disasters that take place and death and birth defects and disease? What about this? Physical evil comes at the hands of our free will too. Again, God created good, but that good wasn't good enough. That turned into humanity's sin, and that sin corrupted creation. It corrupted nature. Cottrell said, physical evils are present in the world because of sin, and sin is present because of free will. Or what about these words from Paul in Romans chapter 8? Against its will, all creation was subjected to God's curse. Because of free will of humanity, nature, creation was affected by the curse of God. And humanity has been chasing its own good from the beginning. And because we continue to do that, that brings about the pain and hurt and the suffering that we face in our life. And because that's the good we choose, the gooder, right? Creation and nature are corrupted too. And so our physical evil that we experience, the suffering and pain, it's the consequences of our sin. And yet, in the midst of that, God says you have free will to choose. And so bad things happen because we have free will, which leads to a broken world. So that's a theological reason that bad things happen to good people. Let me give you a couple of other reasons why this may be true. Bad things happen because of the actions of others. When I was younger, I got two younger brothers. We used to play in our backyard all the time, and we always played ball. I think we were playing kickball this one particular day, and one of us kicked the ball up into these big oak trees that sat in our backyard. So we couldn't get it down, so we looked around. We lived near a parking lot, so we had these rocks. And so we're just tossing rocks as best we can, trying to knock this ball out of the tree. I turned around to go pick up a rock, and next thing you know, I feel this huge thud on the back of my head. And I'm thinking, well, what was that, right? And I'm thinking, well, maybe one of my brothers threw a rock in the air, and it just hit the ball and hit me in the head. Well, I reached around, and I pulled my hand back, and it's just covered in blood. So I run inside. My mom's in there. She was freaking out. She didn't like blood at all. But she calls a nurse lady that was a friend of ours. The nurse came over and looked at it. It's like, just keep it wound up or bandaged up. You're going to be fine. Keep some pressure on it. I don't think you need to go to the hospital. A few years ago, sitting at the kitchen table with my family, with my brothers, my parents, with Karen, we're just kind of reminiscing about the past and some stories and things that happened. And for some reason, this story just came to mind. And so I brought it up like, yeah, I remember that day and this happened and blood and all that kind of stuff. Well, my middle brother, Jason, he was devil incarnate when he was a kid, all right? Terrible, terrible kid. He said, so you know that rock? I was like, yeah, I can't figure out where it came from. He's like, well, you turned around and I saw your big old head. And I was like, why not? And so he said, I threw it at your head on purpose. He doesn't exist anymore. I took care of him after that day and gave him a few of these. But I say that because sometimes suffering we face comes at the hands of others, right? Your kid comes home from school with lice, probably because another parent sent their kid to school with lice. Or someone had an alcoholic bender and now you forever carry the scars of their sin. Or the person you love deeply was taken from this world at the hands of a murderer. Sometimes bad things happen because of the actions of someone else. And we actually see this. We go back to the creation story. God tells Adam and Eve, says, hey, I need you to procreate. I need you to populate the earth. And they do. And they have these two sons, Cain and Abel. And one day out in the field, Cain makes this decision. He's going to kill his brother. And he does. He kills Abel. Now, why does he do this? I think it goes back to the moral evil we were talking about just a second ago. Sometimes someone makes a decision in their life that now affects your life. Cain was full of anger, and in that anger, he unleashed it on his brother Abel, and he kills his brother. Cain had free will to make a decision to deal with his anger, but he didn't. And because he didn't do that, Abel was killed, and this family has to go through this incredible, incredible suffering. Or let's think about Easter. I think one of the most powerful moments in the Easter story is connected to Judas. Here's Jesus who was Tov, right? He was good, he was perfect, he was clean, he was sinless, and Judas didn't want Jesus' good. And maybe he looked at Jesus and thought, Jesus, yeah, you got good, but I want gooder. And so Judas's desires and his greed lead to this moment where he gives Jesus up, and Jesus is arrested and put on trial and finally put to death. Sometimes bad things happen to good people because of the actions of others. But then here's another reason bad things happen because of my actions. Let's say you go to a party and you play beer pong way, way too long. And you shouldn't drive home, but you try to anyway. And on your way home, you get stopped by the police, or you have a wreck. You lose your license. You get thrown in jail because this isn't your first offense. Sometimes the bad things we experience in life have nothing to do with God and everything to do with me. I love these words from Paul in Galatians 6. You will always harvest what you plant. Those who live only to satisfy their own sinful nature will harvest decay and death from that sinful nature. My guess is that some of you right now are planting gardens, and maybe you know how to plant a garden. You've done it for many years, and so you've got a plan in place, and you're putting the time and effort and money into it because you know that if you do this right, that the harvest that's going to come is going to be beneficial to you and maybe even other people. So these words that Paul says here, you understand in the gardening world. I will reap what I sow. But these words are also true when it comes to our lives, that we will reap what we sow. That my actions will lead to bad things happen, or can lead to bad things happening to me. bad decisions I make, the words I say, the actions I take, the sins I commit. Like God says, here's good, enjoy this good, live out this good. And yet we kind of tell God, hey, not now. Like I'm having too much fun, I got too much to do, there's so much life to live. Maybe later on, I'll get to that place. But God, right now, I just want to kind of live my life. And you've got the right to do that. Because again, God gives us free will. And yet sometimes we use that free will for our own desires. God says, here's my good. And we say, God, thanks for the good, but I want to live out my good-er. And when I do that, when you do that, those bad things can happen in our lives. And like a garden, we will reap what we sow. Then I'm going to give you one last reason that bad things happen. And this one's not going to be helpful at all. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you. But it's this: I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why bad things happen to good people. I don't know why your son died at an early age. I don't know why your seemingly healthy friend now has cancer. I don't know why you lost your job. I don't know why bad things happen to good people. I don't know why bad things happen to you. Now, if you ask me, why do bad things happen in people's lives? I can go back and say it's because we live in a broken world. It's because of the actions of someone else. It's because of the actions that you've taken in your life. But the most honest answer I can give you to this question is, I do not know. And I know that sounds like a cop-out. And it probably sounds like a shallow answer. It doesn't help. It doesn't bring resolution. It doesn't give answers. It doesn't bring comfort. It doesn't take away pain or hurt or suffering. But the truth is, if you were to say, hey, Chad, why does this bad thing happen to me? The best answer I can fully give you is, I do not know. So maybe we need to look at this question a little bit differently. In his book, The Problem of Pain, C.S. Lewis says, we were promised sufferings. They were part of the program. We were even told, blessed are those who mourn, and I accept it. I've got nothing that I hadn't bargained for. Maybe what we need to do, instead of fighting the pain and hurt and suffering, is to accept that that's going to be a part of our life. Now, this isn't just true from someone like C.S. Lewis. Jesus even talked about this in John 16. He said, here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows. Notice what Jesus doesn't say here. Jesus doesn't say, here on earth you won't have headaches. He doesn't say you won't get flipped off tomorrow on 495. He doesn't say you're not going to get a zit on your head the day before prom. He doesn't say you won't get sick. He doesn't say you won't get cancer. He doesn't say you're going to lose loved ones way too early. Jesus doesn't say that. And he also doesn't say, if you follow me, your life's going to be great. It's going to be perfect. You're going to experience God's goodness, like every single moment of your life. Jesus doesn't say that either. Jesus says, if you are breathing, if your heart is pumping, if you're alive, hey, guess what? You will have trouble. It's life. It's a part of living. And it's something that's been in place since the beginning of humanity. But then we go back, it's like, well, how do we reconcile the existence of this God then? This all-loving, all-knowing, all-powerful, all-caring God. How do we reconcile the existence of this God when there's evil and there's pain and there's hurt and suffering in the world we live in? Why does this God allow that to happen? Again, maybe we're asking the wrong question. And maybe the question we should be asking is, how can God use my suffering to influence others? Maybe there's some purpose in our pain. And some of you are hearing that and you're thinking to yourself, so God gave me this for the sole purpose of me being able to help someone else in their tough times. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. In fact, if you've heard that, if you've been taught that, that's not true either. It's not how this works. God doesn't give you suffering. God doesn't give you pain. God doesn't cause evil to happen in your life towards you just for the sole purpose of you using that to help someone else. That is not how God works. But maybe in the pain or suffering we're experiencing right now, or we have experienced in our life, the loss of a child, the loss of a job, sickness, disease, abuse, that when those bad things happen, remember, that's not part of God's good, okay? That's why we know God doesn't give these things to us, because that's not part of God's good. Maybe God can use that suffering, one, to transform me, but also to use it to help those going through suffering themselves. If you've been here at the Journey for some period of time, I've shared before that our first child was stillborn. Kendall Grace was 24 years ago. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And as you can still tell, it's still a little bit emotional for me to even think back that far and what we experienced. But I will tell you that I asked that question over and over again. God, why did you let this bad thing happen to us? We're good people, right? We're Christians. We were working in a church. And how could you let this terrible bad thing happen to us? And I will tell you, it was hard. It was very, very difficult. But over time, it did two things. One, Kara and I grew closer to God through it. Now, it didn't happen overnight. It took me probably months, maybe even a couple of years to work through it. Went through this incredible faith crisis at that time too. I'm not even sure I believed in God, because how could God allow this terrible thing to happen in our life? So it brought me closer to God. But the other thing it did, and I did not expect this at all, I wasn't even thinking about this, over the past 24 years, we have had an opportunity to influence other people's lives who've gone through something similar. We've had people that have come to us and told us their own story, and oh yes, we know exactly what you're going through. And we've been able to be there for them and be compassionate and helpful and support them through their own sufferings. See, sometimes these things happen in our life and we think this is it, right? But maybe through what we experience, through the pain, the hurt, the suffering, the evil, God can use that through us to change us, but also to help those who are going through something similar. That's why I love these words from James. Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow, for when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. Now, I read this passage here, and what I see here is that in our faith, one of the greatest things that we have is this thing called hope. It's almost like in the midst of suffering, we actually know that there is something better. Even though suffering hurts and it's painful and we don't want to go through it, we know, for a follower of Christ, there is something better for us, that there is God's good in the midst of it. That's why I love James's words here. Consider tough times, hard times, difficult times, trials, suffering in your life as opportunities to find not more suffering, not more hurt, not more pain, but to find joy, right? To experience the goodness of God in the midst of our pain, to be healed through those tough times, to work through that. But as we do that, maybe even to be used to walk alongside someone else who has gone through something similar. That in the suffering, we can experience God's good. We can experience joy because there's this hope for something better. Joel and I use a lot of Tim Keller material in our messages. Tim Keller was a pastor in New York City for many, many years. He planted a church there, a growing, thriving church there. Put out a ton of books. But back in 2020, he got pancreatic cancer, and in 2023, he succumbed, I think at the age of 65, 66, so he's still very young. He passed away because of the cancer. He was doing an interview a couple of weeks before he passed, and the interviewer was asking him about this, how do you deal with the suffering and pain and the God factor in here? How do you deal with the hurt? And here's what Keller said. He said, I don't know the reason for your suffering, but I do know what it isn't. It's not that God doesn't love you, because Christianity, uniquely among all the religions in the world, says that God came to earth and got involved in the suffering in order to someday end it without ending us. That God sent Jesus to this earth to experience suffering so God could understand our suffering. And what we get out of it is that one day our suffering will be over. How do we know this? Back to John 16 again. Jesus said, here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows. But look at that last part. But take heart because I have overcome the world. That despite all the pain and hurt and suffering and evil that exists in the world that we've seen and we've experienced ourselves, like I told you, I may not fully have the answers to this question. We may not fully get the answers to this question over time or fully understand it. But I believe that there is God's good. And in the pain and hurt and suffering, we can experience that good because of Jesus.